Tabetha Beggs. Welcome to the Tourism Matters podcast. Thank you for being here with me on this very rainy morning.
It's a delight to be here with you on this rainy morning, and it's quite refreshing that we've got a bit of rain, but
It is.
my thoughts and prayers are with those in Exmouth and Coral Bay at the moment, and hope there's not too much damage going on up there.
Now, before we kick off into this conversation, I have a couple of get to know you questions because I have met you before, but I don't know you well, and perhaps my listeners don't know you. So we're going to break the ice here with a couple of questions, Tabetha. And first up, I would like to know, when you are traveling on an aeroplane, are you sitting in the aisle seat, the window seat, or the middle seat?
Nobody wants to sit in the middle seat, right?
I know.
I think my ex-husband used to call it the skiing seat because everyone's got their arms like that, on both the armrests. No, I am definitely a window seater. If I can get the window seat, I'm in my element because I love looking out the window. I love seeing the landscape passing underneath me, the way it changes. And, in the travels that I've done over the years, there's been some spectacular sights, but more locally, one of the things I love is quite often used to fly up to the goldfields in Kalgoorlie. And I love that kind of delineation between sort of the Perth hills, and then you hit sort of the paddocks and the farmland, and it's almost like there's an actual line, and it becomes outback, and you get red dirt and mining pits, and those kind of riverbeds dry riverbeds mostly, but you can see where the river channels have gone through, and I find that fascinating, and I don't think it ever gets old for me.
No,
so definitely window seat every time if I can get one.
And how are you feeling then when you're needing to get up and stretch your legs or go to the bathroom? You don't care? Excuse me, get out of my way, I'm coming.
This is probably going to be one of these oversharing moments, but
go on.
I am like a camel. Like, I do not have to wee that often, but when I do, it's kind of like, excuse me, sorry. But I'll try and hold off as long as possible. But obviously, if you're on an international flight, a bit difficult. But if I'm going long distance, I'm generally with my family, my kids. So I just climb over them and don't care too much.
Thank you. One day, surely I'll get somebody that wants to be in the middle seat. But I
can't wait for that day.
Yeah,
I'm going to high five that person.
Now tell me, when you've arrived at your holiday destination and you're at the hotel buffet breakfast, what's going on your plate, Tabetha? Where are you headed to?
Oh my God. Look, I'm not a big fan of the buffet.
No.
Only because you just eat too much. You just want to try everything, and then you're so full and feel bloated.
Work with me here, Tabetha. If you are starving and all there is a hotel buffet breakfast, where are you going?
The egg station. Love a good omelette. Yeah, always the egg station. I'm not a pastry fan. I'm not a sweet tooth, muffins or anything like that. It'll either be the egg station or, a bit of, bacon sausage.
You're not shoving Danishes in your pockets to take them with you for the day.
Although I do for the other people. The children get, I'll be like, I'll put a couple of muffins in case they get hungry earlier. If there's a couple of bits of fruit, Yeah.
Oh, I love it. We're all sticking Danishes in our pockets at the hotel buffet breakfast. We certainly are.
I'm just not a Danish fan. I never have been.
I'm not a Danish fan either, and I say this almost every episode, but I'm not a Danish fan. But if I'm at a hotel buffet breakfast, I promise you there will be a Danish on my plate. Never in any other aspect of my life would I steer towards some kind of Danish, but I don't know what happens. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Right, I'm going to go back to young Tabetha. Where did you grow up?
Long ago.
No. So back in 2015, where did you grow up? Are you from Perth?
I am born and bred Perth, yes. I grew up in the Perth Hills. While I didn't start my life in the hills, predominantly my spiritual home is the hills. I grew up in Rollystone. My childhood was all about the bush, the orchards, scrumping for fruit. I don't think I ever paid for a piece of fruit. Always,
What's scrumping?
Scrumping. That's
Yeah.
when you secretly, nick into an orchard and
Oh.
just, pick a few apricots or
Uh,
apples or whatever were in season, and oranges, lots of oranges. I don't like to call it stealing.
and so we call
Scrumping.
it scrumping instead. All
It's
right,
kind
okay.
of like tramping, through what the Kiwis call
Yeah.
hiking.
Yeah. Okay.
Scrumping
That's
is
good.
stealing fruit.
That was public service on behalf of my listeners going, what on earth is scrumping? What are they doing there in
There you go.
Australia?
I've just introduced a new word.
Thank you. All right. So growing up in the Perth Hills. And then when you finished school, well, firstly, did you finish all the way through to year 12?
I did. I
Yeah.
did go all the way through to year 12. I did work experience in a travel agency, and they offered me a job after 2 weeks. That was in year 10. But to be honest, I didn't want to leave my friends. So I was like, no, I'll go, I'll keep going through to year 12. So yeah, I did do my entire tertiary education.
Wow. So if you're doing work experience in a travel agency, were you studying travel or tourism at school, or that was just where you ended up for work experience?
Okay, this is the story that I told to some TAFE students recently. So what I really wanted to do when I left school was become a rock star or a actress or something in
Of
the
course.
arts. Look, I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, one.
And so I told my career officer this. He's, that year 10, what do you want to do for work experience? And I said, well, I want to be a rock star. And I'm not sure how he took that. And I was like, I'm dead serious. So they found me a placement in a travel agency, which I assumed meant this was to get me used to, traveling and being on my world tours. So, but no, that was probably my first experience in tourism. So I did 2 weeks at a travel agency called Energy Travel. And they had in that period of time that I was doing work experience, they had a special on for Bali. And so it was really busy. And so I kind of, I guess, showed my work ethic at a very early age, because I was just like picking up the phone and sort of listening in to what the travel agents were saying
Wow.
and trying to convey information to the people calling up, even though I couldn't book anything. I didn't have that skill. But yeah, so I think, that work ethic came at a very young age, and they recognized that and offered me a position after those 2 weeks. Like I say, I didn't take it. And I often wonder, how my life might have been different if I had
Yeah.
taken those 2 weeks, but I didn't. So,
One of the
no, I was, determined to pursue a career in the arts and, go and audition for WAPA. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. All right. So you finished high school, and then what are you doing after that?
So I did get an audition at WAPA.
You did. For my listeners, can you explain what WAPA is?
So WAPA is the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts. Hugh Jackman is probably one of the most famous people that went there. And so I went and did my audition, and I was all of, I don't know, 17, I think, at the time. And the result of that, clearly I'm not an actress on TV, so I clearly didn't get into it. But look, they said to me, I did a great performance. They said, but you're a bit green and you need to go and get some life experience, because all great actors have life experience to draw from. So I think that became a theme for the rest of my life. I was like, right, I've got to go get some life experience. So
Right.
So I thought, right, okay, well, I'm going to take that advice and I'm going to go and do that. So I worked for a year at Maya in the city, which at the time was brand new. They just built the building. So I was one of the first people to ever work in that Maya. And any young people listening to this podcast would be like, well, that was a long time ago. That Maya's been there a long time. But yeah, so that's where I worked to save up for a year, and bought a ticket to the UK and went off to get my life experience.
Wow. So now hang on a minute, because I saw
I
this
know
the
what
other
you're going to
day.
ask me.
Yes, I am. Because as far as I'm aware, Maya does not have a cheese counter. But according to your stories, somewhere along the line, there was a cheese counter. So I just have to spend just a minute on exploring this, please.
All right. Well, I won't bore you with the details. But when I got the job at Myer, I assumed that I would be in the Miss shop or, some sort of fashion store, which would be really cool and, impress all my friends. But back then, Myer on the bottom floor, which is now menswear, used to have a food court. So there was a food court, well, half of it was a food court and half of it
Okay.
was like this gourmet food market.
Yes.
And it was
Yep.
absolutely stunning. And they had food from all over the world. They had a bakery, they had salad counter, pie counter, everything. And they had a cheese counter. And that was the role that I got, was to
Wow.
be on the cheese counter. And I was not happy about that at the time. I was like, oh my God, that is like, how am I going to tell anyone I've like got this job on a cheese counter? But the upside of that is, while at the time I didn't think it was interesting, I was like learning about cheeses that were imported from all over the world. Yeah, I think it was just another of those things in life that you don't expect and you don't think at the time that it is important or interesting until much later in life, when you reflect on it and tell stories like this, that you realize just what sort of education you did get from
Yeah.
that role. Yeah.
And I talk about this with just about every guest, but it's just that sort of layering your own unique personal and career experiences, just layer upon layer upon layer of, you know, wild experiences like working at the cheese counter in Maya that just kind of make you, Tabitha, and give you your unique lens on the world. So I think, yeah, I think all experience is good experience, whether it feels like it at the time or not.
Yeah. I'm
All
glad you
right.
didn't
So,
use the cliche of being cheesy. So there we go. Because I am. The reason I went to the UK was because I had family there. My parents are English. In fact, all my family are English. I was the first Aussie born into our family,
wow.
and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
Um, but most Aussies end up in London, in Earl's Court and working in a bar, pub. But I went to Coventry, which is sort of, I don't know, about an hour's drive north of London, in
Hmm.
where Lady Godiva is from, and they used the big car manufacturing industry there. It's not the prettiest place in the world, but that's where I was. My intention was sort of to go there, use that as a base, and then sort of backpack around the world from there. But that sort of didn't happen. And the reason that didn't happen is because the night that I arrived there, my got a half brother, he grew up in the UK. So I met up with him on the first night that I got there, and he said, look, I can't come till later because I've got this dress rehearsal for this musical that I'm in. And I said, what? You're in a musical? He's like, oh, yeah, you can come if you want. And I was like, yeah, oh, yeah, I'd love to come. So he comes and picks me up and takes me to this dress rehearsal of this play that he's doing. And I kind of never looked back. I remember sitting in the theatre that night watching this amazing cast of people, young people doing this play, and thinking, I was meant to be here.
Wow.
This is my kind of destiny. Yeah, and I ended up auditioning for the theatre company, I don't know, about 6 months later. And while I think about 200 people audition, and they only took 8 new recruits, and I was one of them. So I kind of got to live that sort of theatre dream alongside everything else I did. That was kind of like a part-time thing. Yeah. So, but and I did work in a pub, because that's what you do.
You
That's
have
part of
to.
your coming of age.
Yep.
I actually really enjoyed working in the pub. That was really good fun. Yeah. Great way to
Wow.
get to meet people.
Wow, that's amazing. What age would you have been here?
So I was 18. Yeah.
18.
So I left home, I left my country, and I went off on my life experience gaining journey.
Wow. All right. How long were you overseas for?
So I ended up living there for 6 years. So,
Wow.
so my 6 month kind of trip turned into 6 years. Yeah.
Wow. And did you do much travel while you were away?
I did a little bit of travel, but not anywhere to the extent that I had thought I would, because I ended up getting a really good job. I ended up working for the Royal Society of Arts, who were originally located in London, but relocated to Coventry because it was cheaper and they had a new business park. When I got offered this role as a temp, I started off as a temp. And I don't know if people temp anymore, but and I was like, Royal Society of Arts, yeah, that sounds like me. But I was a filing clerk. So I filed my little fingers off and tried to impress, the boss and be like, I'm willing to do anything. And so that role sort of turned into a secretarial role, that turned into a sort of officer role, that turned into probably quite a pivotal role for me, which there's a bit of a story in that one. So at some point when I was working as an officer, there was a job ad came up on the notice board for an exhibitions officer. But it said that you had to be 26 or over to apply for the role. And I was only 21 at the time. But the role sounded so good. You got a car, or it wasn't even a car, it was a van to go and drive out to all these exhibition places and go and sort of market the Royal Society of Arts. So I applied for it anyway and just thought, what have I got to lose? I either get it or I don't. It'll be a good experience for the interview. And yeah, after the interview, the marketing manager said, I'm willing to adjust the age. You're perfect. I think you would be great for this job. And I think one of the reasons, apart from skill set, but I think one, I had the right personality for it, but also I think she loved that I was an Aussie. I think she just sort of thought, oh, people are going to love this. People will love an Aussie going out there and, the accent and, whatever the demeanor was that I had. Yeah, so the reason it had to be 26 or over was because of the insurance on the van. Because obviously when you're younger, the premium is higher. But she was willing to pay the extra for the premium so I could have the job. So the job entailed me travelling all over the UK, up to Scotland, over to Ireland, to Belfast and Dublin, doing all these exhibitions for them in some of the probably best known exhibition and conference centres across the UK.
Wow.
And at some point, I don't know whether I think about it now, whether I thought about it then, but when I think about it now, I was like, this is tourism. I am traveling around in all these places and I'm getting to see the UK in a way that I wouldn't have as a tourist. I mean, I have seen more loading docks than you could count, but I love loading docks. All the interesting people are there.
I love loading.
One day I'm going to write a book called Loading Docks and Stage Doors because I've probably seen more of them than, sitting in the audience or being the conference delegates. So that was probably my first foray into not technically tourism, but pretty much what I do now is the same as what I was doing then, just selling a different product.
Yeah, I just did want to just double click on that for my listeners and just say this is not the first time I've spoken to somebody on this podcast that applies for a job even without meeting all the kind of selection criteria. Like you could have easily not applied for that, Tabetha, because you weren't yet 26. And so I just want to reiterate to listeners, if you're looking to enter the industry or you're moving around within the industry and looking at changing jobs, I mean, the selection criteria, it really is more of a wish list for the employer. If you are keen on a job and feel like you are equipped to do the job, for God's sake, apply. Don't ask, don't get.
Yeah.
This is just a really perfect example of, you could have easily just gone, oh, well, that's not me. I'll have to wait 5 years. Whereas putting yourself out there,
and and we can talk about this later, but as a mentor for women in tourism and hospitality, and anyone I'm talking to, really, it's one point that I really drive home is just sometimes you have to take those leaps of faith, because most of the time you've got nothing to lose. You're probably already in a role. So, if you apply and you don't get it, you're still, employed. But if you don't try, you'll never know. And I think that is a principle I have applied in many aspects of my life. And touch wood, it's always served me fairly well. I mean, yeah, it's not like I've got every job I've been for, or there hasn't been disappointment, but am I glad that I tried? Yeah, of course I am.
Yeah. All right. So at some point, you obviously relocate back to Australia because you're sitting down the road from me. So, So talk to me about what happens next after 6 years.
Okay. Well, just backtracking from that, because after I worked at the Royal Society of Arts for most of that time, but because as I said earlier about my theatre passions, I got offered a job on a holiday resort, like working as an entertainer. And I really had to make a choice, because I was like, well, I've got this amazing job that's paying really well. I get to travel. I'm doing all this great stuff. But I really want to try and see where my theatre career could go, because I always still had that passion, and was still obviously doing it part-time with the theatre company that I was with. So I got offered a job on the island of Rhodes in Greece to go and work at this holiday resort out there. And I always say this was my sliding door moment. We always have one. I didn't take the job, but I always wonder how my life would have changed had I taken that role. So that was my one kind of like, oh, what would have been different? So anyway, I didn't take it, but I then got offered a few months later a different job on a holiday resort, but this time it was in Lancashire, in up north of England, and the location was far less glamorous. But I just thought, do you know what? I've got to get this out of my system. I've got to go do it. And so, yeah, I ended up on a 7-month season up in Lancashire.
Wow.
And what I can tell you about that role is that, again, another sort of step into tourism, because we, was a holiday resort. But the role was not what I was expecting at all. I sort of had visions of Dirty Dancing, and I was going to be up in the clubhouse carrying my watermelon and, flirting with all these gorgeous guys. Oh my God, it was so not that.
Oh my God.
It was the sort of lowest paid job for the most amount of hours. We worked 6 days a week. We had 1 day off a week. It was a Tuesday. There was nowhere else to go. It was this little tiny place in the moors. And we would be up at, 6 a.m. doing the kids club, the Tiger Club, running the sports and arts and crafts for kids. And then in the evening, we'd be running the darts competition and the bingo. And then at 9 o'clock, then I'd put on my costume and I'd be singing and doing the entertainment. Look, it sounds fun and hilarious when I talk about it now, but yeah, not a job I would recommend.
I'm sorry, Tabetha, that sounds exhausting.
It was so exhausting. I mean, we were literally just childminders for these people that just wanted to, get rid of their kids and, have a nice relaxing time themselves.
Wow. Yeah.
But look, again, it's all part of my story, and yeah, I'm glad I did it. And so after 7 months, I decided, well, the season ended anyway, so it was a clear and cut sort of, I didn't have to leave. That was the end of the role, the contract. So yeah, then I was like, right, I'm ready to come back home.
Right.
And well, actually, look, I'm going to be honest, and I, because I am an oversharer, I wasn't really ready to come back home, but something happened back home, and I thought I need to go home and sort this out. And so my hand was forced a little bit. So coming home was a little bit bittersweet for me.
Yeah. Well, this is beautiful. This is the reality of life. Our careers don't happen in isolation from the rest of our personal life.
No,
they don't. Yeah. And so sometimes we don't get to make the decisions we want to make. And it's about knowing that whatever happens next happens next. So thank you for sharing that it wasn't necessarily, I just love not sugarcoating our careers and making them sound, like they're perfectly formulated and, have been perfectly executed from this role to another. They're messy. And
so messy.
Yeah. And life's messy.
Mm.
All right. So you come back to Australia. I just want to ask at this point, what do you identify yourself as professionally? Like what do you think that it is that you do?
Ooh, that's a tough question. What do I do? I mean,
well, what would you, if you came back to Australia, what sort of jobs were you looking for? Maybe that's an easy way of putting it. Like what are you thinking?
So coming back to Australia, I had a false sense of importance. I might, that sounds terrible.
No.
But I came back thinking I am going to land any job I apply for in, marketing or entertainment or any of those industries that I'd sort of been involved with, because I just thought having, this on my resume I would look so good on paper, but that was not the reality at all.
Right.
I came home, I applied for, I can't even remember, some advertising agencies, marketing agencies. It's a while ago now, I can't remember. But everything I applied for, no response, rejection.
Yeah.
And I'm not generally a person that gets depressed, but if I was ever the lowest in my life, it was then, because for a couple of reasons. One, this was back in the day, long before social media, mobile phones, anything like that. So I had only kept in contact with one kind of school friend in that time that I'd been in the UK, because I'd made this whole new bunch of friends, all my theatre friends, work friends and all that. So I was so disconnected when I got home that I just wanted to go back to England. I was like, I just want to go back where I've now established my life and the things that I love. And I had all these, good jobs and good experiences. So it was really quite tough at that point. And I'm going to tell you what, the thing that I came home for is my mum and dad were separating. And that was a really hard shake. I was 25 years old, and they weren't the couple that anyone ever expected to split up. So it was really difficult. And I found it, on top of this whole like looking for another job thing, sort of coming home, leaving behind this world that I loved and was thriving in. I thought, I thought I could come back and fix it. But anyway, I couldn't. And that all took its course. But I think because of that, that's what led me to the next step. So I worked in a cafe, then I did a bit of reception work, and the reception job I got through a family friend, and I think I'd been there about 6 months, and they decided they were downsizing their staff. And because I was the last one in, I was the first one out, and probably, being a receptionist, they're a dime a dozen. So I sort of just got to the point where I'd reestablished some friendships. I'd made some new friendships. I'd moved out with the one friend that I kept. She invited me to go and flat with her and another girl. And I remember going home, going back to the house that night, and I was all down in the dumps because they just let me go. And I thought, God, what am I going to do now? And the other friend, who is actually now my best friend, she said, oh, God, what's wrong with you? Did you lose your job or something? And I said, oh, I did actually. And she's like, oh, shit. That night, she said, oh, my brother's coming down from Kalgoorlie with some mates. We're going to the pub. Come with us, just come and have a few drinks and a bit of a laugh. We'll cheer you up, sort of thing. So, so I went to it was Ogden's in Gosnells. I remember that. It was a karaoke night. I remember doing a couple of numbers, and sort of, got chatting with the boys that had come down from Kalgoorlie. And they were like, oh, well, if you're not working, why don't you come back to Kalgoorlie with us for the weekend and just, come and have a bit of fun up there. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not doing that. Why would I'm not going up to Kalgoorlie. Obviously, I'd had a few drinks that night, because the next morning I said, no. the next morning I left a note on the kitchen bench to my two flatmates and gone to Kalgoorlie. So I ended up going up there with them. And that became the next 6 months of my life, the next 6 years of my life. So I went up for the weekend, and 6 years later I came back from Kalgoorlie. So, yeah.
Oh, that's funny. So what were you doing in Kalgoorlie?
Again, a couple of weird things. So the first job I got was in a gold assay lab, which is basically where they analyze soil samples to find out, if there's gold in them and if they should keep digging in that hole where they found the soil sample. So I think I've made Twiggy Forrest quite rich. We used to do some of his samples. Did that for a bit. That was not a glamorous job, working in a laboratory, and about the mining industry through that as well. The sort of turning point of that job was one night the manager of the assay lab came into the laboratory, which he never really did, and it was such a sexist industry because the girls worked in the lab and the boys were all worked down the back grinding rocks and doing stuff like that. And the manager walked in and he said, "Hey, can anyone in here type?" And I wasn't a great typist, but I was like, yep, I can type. And he's like, "Oh, come in the office. The secretary's just walked out." And I was like, okay. So I went in and typed up some results, some soil results. And I never saw the inside of the lab again after that. And then I sort of worked my way up there and became their office administrator. And I did that for a few years. And what was really, other than the whole learning other things, was the guy that owned the laboratory, owned 4 laboratories around the goldfields, and he was a pilot. So quite often he'd take me up in his little Cessna to the other labs. And it was really great going to these really remote places. And I felt pretty special, going in this, just being him in his little Cessna, and, that was pretty cool. And then a little bit like the whole England story, during that time I joined the local theatre there, little amateur theatre. And through doing, some plays at the Goldfields Repertory Club, I met a lady who became sort of the CEO for the Australian Prospectors and Miners Hall of Fame, which was a new attraction that Kalgoorlie had kind of bidded for and won to build this sort of museum. And she approached me and said, "Hey, I need an assistant. We're just about to build this tourism attraction. How would you feel about coming for an interview and working for me?" I was like, "Yeah, okay, sounds good."
Wow.
So then I went and had sort of an interview with her and ended up working for the Australian Prospectors and Miners Hall of Fame, which I saw, built from the ground up. It was just a patch of dirt when we started, and and it being it wasn't so much I guess it was a non-for-profit, but it was, it was funded by federal grants and state grants and donations from mining companies. And that was definitely sort of certainly my first proper tourism job, I would say, because I then got involved in different tourism organisations as the sort of rep for the new tourism attraction, working with the Kalgoorlie Boulder Visitor Centre. I was on their board for a while. I was part of the inaugural St Barbara's Festival celebrations that happen each year now in Kalgoorlie. And so that was sort of an interesting turnaround of my life, I think, in Kalgoorlie.
Right.
That's when I really got into tourism.
What, can we put a timestamp on this, Tabetha? What sort of year is this?
Oh, so this was 1999, I think. The Hall of Fame opened in 2000. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so are you doing that then until you return back to Perth?
Of course.
Yeah.
No one got divorced this time.
Great. This was by your own free will?
Sort of,
Sort of.
Broke up with a boyfriend. I was like, that's it.
That'll do it. We've all got
Two
that
smaller
in our story.
towns.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all had that story, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I'd actually left the Hall of Fame because this sounds really conceited and I don't mean it in this way, but I got headhunted for a role with the Goldfields Tourism Association. And they asked me if I wanted to go and do some work for them. And I thought, oh, yeah, I'll do something different.
Yeah.
And I guess by then I really wanted to be more involved in the tourism industry more succinctly. So I took that role and I did that for, I don't know, about 12 months. And then, then it was time to come back to Perth.
Wow. Okay. So what does the next sort of stage of your career look like then? You return to Perth, and then are you sort of more firmly embedded in the tourism industry from here?
Yes and no.
Mm.
I again took a couple of different roles.
Yep.
Worked in recruitment for a little while. It was another turning point, or another industry that I'd never expected myself to be in. And the funny thing about the recruitment role was the reason I got that job was because the manager was a Kalgoorlie boy, and he employed me purely on the basis that I'd just come from Kalgoorlie. He was like, oh, anyone that's been in Kalgoorlie, yep, good in my book.
But, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt there. Again, this is, I think we forget that on the other side of a job ad is a human being or human beings
Connection.
who, yeah, they have their own, you can put whatever you want in a job ad, but the human being or human beings behind the piece of paper, they've got their own motivations, and sometimes
Yeah.
they're not the same motivations as what the HR team that put the job ad together is. So I think this is just another reason to just apply for jobs that you feel like you are well suited for, or maybe even not, that you're interested in, and you just never ever know. I had a job really briefly when I first relocated to Perth in 2011 or 12, somewhere around there. I couldn't find a job in tourism, so I thought I needed to do something. And I got a job as a researcher at a mining, oil and gas newspaper. And I just applied for it because I was like, well, I can string a sentence together. I don't know anything about mining or oil and gas, but I can do this. And then later I found out from my boss, we were a very small team of 3 people, but she said, I really liked that you almost fell off the chair when you got up. I was sitting in the waiting room, and she said, when I got up to get you, to bring you into the office, you nearly fell off the chair that you were trying to get up out of. It was a very difficult chair to get out of, might I add. And she just said, I just loved that you just owned that, and that you just seemed a bit silly, and I could, see that you were just bright enough to, string sentences together and do some research. And I thought I would really enjoy working with you because we were such a small team. It was very important to her that she gelled well with her staff, more important than the supposed degree in journalism that you're supposed to have to get this job. I just saw these things listed and went, bugger it, I'm just going to apply. And me being the type of person that she wanted on her team far surpassed my lack of journalism expertise. So that was just a very roundabout way of sort of saying, we need to remember when we're going through what can sometimes be soul destroying experience of searching for a new job, that at the end of the day, there's a human being on the other side that has their own motivations. So you were employed in a position that you felt you had no business being in purely because you just moved from Kalgoorlie and the person hiring was from Kalgoorlie.
Look, I think connection is so important, and I not all my roles have been I haven't got all my roles because I knew somebody, but I mean that does help if you do know somebody, but mostly it's about turning up and being your true self in an interview. And the example that you've just used about the chair, I think I guess it really depends what industry you are applying for and what the role is, but definitely something like tourism, you're allowed to show your kind of fun side, and you don't have to be an expert as long as you're willing to learn and put yourself out there and say, look, what I don't know, you can teach me.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Yeah, and I think generally, from my experience, is that employers are willing to teach you if you have the right attitude. You don't need to know everything. Like, yes. So anyway, I could keep talking about that for a long time, so I won't. But
No, but just on that point, I just came into my mind. It's that one of the reasons that, and the next role I'm going to talk about was very much a good example of this, is that I won't stay in a job if I don't get a good vibe from the team that I'm working with. It's more important to me that I enjoy the people that I work with, no matter what their skills are. I just don't want to work with miserable people or people that are too serious about anything, you know, because you spend such a big part of your life at work. I do not subscribe to the, don't bring your life to work. I'm like, you spend a lot of time at work. I want to know what's going on in your life. And if something bad's going on, you don't have to tell me all the details, but, let us know, because then we can be understanding and sort of accommodate a little bit because of that, Yeah, I mean, maybe that's just an old-fashioned kind of thing. I think that's changed a lot over the years. But yeah, I think part of the interview process should be, and if you don't do it, it should be part of your process. Will this person fit in with the rest of the team dynamic? That's so important for an organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say especially in our industry, but it's probably not especially in our industry, but we're such a,
But it is a
people-centric.
industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very difficult to, execute on showing tourists a good time. Your team doesn't work well together, or you don't have to get along beautifully with everyone on your team, but you do need to be able to function as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, well, let's keep going.
All right.
So you're in recruitment.
And then I finally get a job at the City of Perth in the marketing department, and I just think this is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Okay.
So, so I started off as the executive or the assistant to the marketing manager, sort of like her PA. How old am I now? I'm about probably 26, 27. Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
Was I old? No, I'd turned 30 in Kalgoorlie. No, I was in my 30s by then. So I was probably about 35. Yeah, so did that. And then I was at the City of Perth for 12 years. And during those 12 years, I took 2 rounds of maternity leave. I got married, had my 2 kids. We traveled, we did lots of things, bought houses and all that sort of grown-up stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the roles that I kind of ended up doing for the City of Perth was the tourism officer. So that, again, sort of was a kind of grounding experience for, who was who in tourism then, and particularly for the City of Perth as, the gateway to WA, and what we could do to make it a welcoming city, and a city that probably back then was really at the grassroots of its tourism kind of growth.
Yeah.
So much has been developed since that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of a role that that I loved, and made lifelong friends through there. I still run into people, especially in local government. So local government's has been a bit of a theme in my life as well.
Right.
But it's one of those industries, a bit like tourism, where everyone just sort of moves around in that sector, and you're always running into different people, and a lot of those people end up in tourism. Yeah, so probably a story coming up later. But yeah, so yeah, City of Perth, so 12 years there.
Wow.
And then I decided I was going to go out on my own and so I started my own little cabaret company, which kind of was based on the philosophy of I still wanted to perform. I had friends that were in the same kind of boat as me. They had young kids. They loved performing, but, it was really difficult when, you've got young kids at home. And so I said, well, why don't we start up our own little cabaret company? And because I don't think that as mums we need to put our ambitions and dreams behind us. Like, let's set an example for our kids and keep going and, see
Wow.
how we can still do stuff. And so it was a really great adventure. We did some fringe shows and some different things that were really exciting.
Yeah.
And one of my proudest moments
Oh,
was having that company. But at some point down the track, everyone went off and did something else, and so my numbers kind of dwindled. And I guess at that point, I was doing a lot of writing. I was doing some arts reviewing. So I guess the point being is that I haven't really stayed on the one trajectory all the time. I've sort of
mm,
had all these other passions and sort of tried different things. And I'm really glad that I did, because I think it
mm,
makes people way more interesting and life
mhm.
more interesting, and makes your story when you're doing a podcast really long. Sorry. Then I went to the Kalamunda Chamber of Commerce. Again, whole different thing. Never expected to work for a chamber of
Wow.
commerce. And so I became the CEO for them. And I guess the reason they employed me and why I was a good prospect for them, because the chamber had a lot of tourism businesses as their members, and they wanted to concentrate more on the tourism side of things. And so the Chamber of Commerce will sort of own and operate the Bickley Harvest Festival, the farmers markets, the Twilight hawker markets. So, I was sort of running in charge of these events, obviously with a team of other people.
Mhm.
So again, it probably was more leaning towards tourism than the actual sort of business side of things. I mean, we did all
Right.
the workshops and networking as well, but
Mhm.
with a huge emphasis on tourism. So yeah, so I did that for a while, and then I got a phone call from a friend that I used to work at the City of Perth with, who said, "Hey, there's a job going at Tourism WA. Are you interested?" And I was like, God, of the top 5 places I would
Ah,
want to work, probably, I say top 5, it was probably one of the places that I wanted to work.
wow.
I said, yeah, okay, thanks. Thanks for the heads up. She said, look, I'll give you the details, but you go and get it on your own merit. I'm just going to make that connection. So, yeah, so I went and had this very odd coffee meeting with the executive director of marketing there. It wasn't a formal interview at all. It was kind of this, let's have a coffee and I'll get to meet you and, see where we go.
Mhm.
And she, after that interview, the chat, she said, you're a bit overqualified for the job that I need. She said, but hang on, I'm going to go speak to HR because we really want you. I really think you need to be working for this organization. So the next day, I got an email from Tourism WA and said, come in, we'd like to chat to you, or we've got another officer that wants to chat to you. And because I'd had this coffee interview, I kind of just went in thinking it was going to be a coffee interview. And then so I go in, I said, oh, I'm here to see David. Can't think of his surname now. Anyway, David. And they were like, oh, yeah, come through. And there's like this panel of 3 people at an interview. And I was like, oh God, turn on your professional head. So yeah, so I sort of, in some way, it was probably good because I wasn't prepared. I wasn't nervous. I was just like, oh,
Yeah, okay.
I'll just go for it and answer their questions and see what happens. And
Wow.
the next thing I know, I'm employed by the in the executive services department, answering to the Minister of Tourism at Tourism WA.
Wow. What was your job title? What was your role?
Well, that's because I had a couple of roles, but
Okay.
my first role was corporate hospitality. So yeah, I was organising all the tickets to the events that Tourism WA sponsor, all the
Okay.
VIP
Got it.
kind of tickets
Yep.
for the special people that got to go into the corporate lounges and the
Yeah.
all that stuff. So that was really exciting. And yeah, I really loved that role.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, which was obviously an interesting time for the
Mm.
tourism industry. And I will always be incredibly grateful that they kept me on, because I was only on a contract at the time, but they kept me on. And again, I think this is one of my sort of key points that I make in when I'm doing any mentoring is I've always been quite good at like telling people where I'd like to go in life and things that I like to do. And this is what else I've done. And, this is, something I'm interested in. If there's ever an opportunity, let me know, because no one can help you if they don't know where you want to go or what you want to do. So through a few conversations, getting involved in, different working groups or whatever, I got offered to move into the stakeholder engagement area, and eventually got a role working like a permanent full-time role working in industry and partnerships for Tourism WA, which was amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's such good advice though, Tabetha, just to, voice your desires or ambitions. And I think a good employer will also do their best to try and understand the goals and ambitions of their staff and see, sometimes, your goal might be to be a rock star, and perhaps your employer can't really help facilitate that so much. But if you have a professional goal that's aligned with the role that you're doing, I think a good employer will do their best to make themselves aware of it, and then help you to grow and work towards your goal, which keeps you, an engaged and motivated employee.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's how you maintain loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
Once people get sick of a job or sick of
Mm-hmm.
not being listened to or appreciated, they will move on.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so Tourism WA.
Look, I don't know how long I can keep flying this flag, but one of the best things that ever happened to me in my whole life, not just at Tourism WA, but it happened to be because of Tourism WA. As I said, it was kind of during COVID. And this is a good example of, talk to people, tell them what you want. Who cares if they're like, shut up? I'm like, oh, I'm just going to keep telling you this is what I do and what I love.
Yeah.
So I had been quite vocal about the fact that I had liked to write. I'd had a few things published by this point, some short stories and a little novella that I'd written. Yet to have a best-selling novel, but it's coming, people, it's coming. So the executive director of marketing, who I'd had that coffee chat with that first time, she approached me and said, hey, we need someone to kind of go out on the road and help us shape our new marketing campaign. We want to hear, we want to go and talk to all these sub-regions around WA and kind of get their take on, what makes each place special. So she said, how would you like to do that? And I was like, yes, I would absolutely like to do that. And again, not a solo mission. This was all, a whole team of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of led the project, which was called Our Story, The Spirit of Adventure. And so, while everyone else was in lockdown, I was getting on planes and flying off to Albany and Esperance and up to the Pilbara and up to the Kimberley and running. I did 31 workshops across a couple of years and wrote 31 positioning statements for each of these places.
Wow.
And, I got to write, which is my passion, and travel. And every time I went, every destination, I took somebody else from around the organization with me. So I got to know all these people in a, I often say, we started the day we go on this adventure, we start off as colleagues and we come back as, friends, because you got 6 hours in a car or on a plane and you just chat and you talk. And, again, I think, that sort of experience not only lent itself to my tourism skill set, but it lent itself to my writing skill set as well. I mean, I've got so much to draw from you know, from the people I've met, not just the people I traveled with, but the people I met in these locations, in these towns, talking about their passion for their town and how they wanted us to talk about what was beautiful about those regions, not just us sitting in an office in Perth, never having been to that location.
Right.
You can't promote anything authentically without having your feet on the ground there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that was the most amazing role that I've ever had. The most amazing. I just ran out of places to go eventually, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd still be out there doing it, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, listen up, other STOs around Australia.
Yeah.
Tabetha needs more places to go.
I need more places to go. I'm willing to travel anywhere. Yeah. Just put me on a plane. I don't care where I go.
Yeah. Wow. And I think I just wanted to touch on there quickly what you said, not only, can you not adequately promote a destination if you haven't had some experience there, but also being respectful and understanding of how the community wants the destination promoted. Yeah. And like you said, listening to the community and listening to what their thoughts are and their feelings are about how their destination should be promoted. So that's very powerful and very forward thinking, I think, on behalf of Tourism WA to take that approach.
Yeah. Look, it was a really probably a different approach. But one of the so many things I could tell you about that particular thing, but I won't bang on about it because, we're probably way over time already. What was beautiful about that moment was that listening to generally what we think of a place, we have a perceive that, our own perception of what we've seen or read. It's nothing compared to being there and talking to the people in the community and all sorts of people. You have to travel with an open mind. And it's not just about the destination. 9 times out of 10, it's about the people you meet there and them telling you their stories. That's so important. And you know what? That's what I was going to say. I remembered. There were so many times, in fact, I'm going to say nearly every time, when I left a destination, people would come and hug me and they would be like, thank you so much for coming here. No, but we feel like nobody ever sees us, but we feel seen. Like, this is amazing. Thank you for coming and listening to us. And that's what it was. Yeah. It was listening.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? On so many levels.
Yeah.
All right. So you're obviously not with Tourism WA anymore.
No.
Yeah.
No, I said that in a bad way. Look, weirdest decision of my life, leaving Tourism WA. Not sure why I did that. I'm going to blame menopause. Am I allowed to say menopause? Yes, is it a taboo word? No. Let's talk more about that. But no, I had a really weird moment. Things were happening in my life. And I was just like,
sometimes it's time.
Okay, I'm going to do something else. Okay. Well, actually, what I left to do was write a book. I was like, that's it. I'm going to go and write this book that I've been banging on about forever. And so I went to do that. Again, life took a turn. And I got a phone call from another friend that I used to work with at the City of Perth. He said, got a job going at the City of Armidale for a tourism specialist. We need someone to come and write our tourism strategy. We'd love it if you would consider the role. And it was like 2 days a week for a year's contract or something. And I was like, okay, yeah, I reckon I could do 2 days a week and write my novel in the other 3 days. So I went for an interview for that job, got it, and 2 days turned into 3 days a week. The 1 year contract turned into a 3-year contract. After a while, I was there 4 days a week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'd written the tourism strategy and then they needed someone to, I might have written my own role into the strategy a little bit. Yeah. Here's your strategy. Now you're going to need someone to roll it out.
Smart move. Yeah. So, well played, Tabetha. Well played.
Well, you got to serve your own interests sometimes. And of course, I'd come full circle because I grew up in Roleystone and Roleystone was part of the local government of City of Armidale. So I was really passionate about tourism. I was passionate about the location and I also felt it was kind of an underrated location, not talked about enough. So I was really keen to really showcase a lot more of what the Perth Hills had to offer. So kind of a good fit there.
Yeah, right.
And then how I ended up at Destination Perth. So I'd done 3 years at Armidale, went on a holiday to Spain with my kids. And when I got back from Spain, I was just looking through LinkedIn and I saw a Destination Perth post. There was this new job there, but it was a brand new role for a tourism experiences lead. And I sort of looking at the criteria and I was like, oh, I think this job's got my name written all over it. So yeah, I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. I've got this great job at Armidale, but, maybe this might be something different and, to extend my skills a little bit further. And so, yeah, I applied and here I am.
Wow. 6 months, is it?
Yeah, I started in September last year, so
Right.
maybe just over 6 months.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's just talk about that quickly then. Tell me, what does a tourism experiences lead do for a regional tourism organisation?
So the regional tourism organisations, as hopefully most of the listeners will know what one of those is. So effectively, they're a sort of a marketing agency for that region. But over time, there's been more sort of, I don't want to say pressure, but more emphasis on the RTOs to sort of get into more destination development roles. So I think with that in mind, Destination Perth leaned into that and thought, well, why don't we get an experience lead in here to come and sort of develop some of that tourism, those destinations and tourism product and tourism experiences. So basically I kind of, go out and identify the kind of gaps in our products and experiences. What have we got? What do we need more of? How can we sort of extend what we have? So yeah, so I've just come back from 2 days in the Avon Valley actually, and I'm sort of talking to, the tourism operators out there and sort of seeing what their view is of their town and how Destination Perth can kind of assist in a advisory kind of role to sort of look at, what they're doing and how maybe they could improve it. So that's sort of essentially what I've been doing.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, I probably will be doing more of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. Yeah, I think the RTOs play a very important role.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I did previously was sitting on the board of AGO, so I kind of already had that experience. Well, yeah, I had that experience. I obviously already knew what an RTO did. Plus, one of my roles at Tourism WA was looking after the partnership contracts, the funded contracts for the RTOs. So I kind of already had quite a wealth of knowledge about what RTOs did and who they were. So, my first day at Destination Perth didn't really feel like a new job. It was just like, oh, I'm just going to go work with some other friends now.
Yeah.
Because I kind of already knew everybody, which was really nice. And
Yeah, that is nice.
It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right. And here we are then in 2026.
Yes. Yes. Who knows what's next?
Who knows? Yeah. I know that's one of the beautiful things about this industry of ours. And one of the reasons I started this podcast is because stories like yours that span different countries and different parts of the industry. And even we all have, well, many of us have times where we dip out of the tourism industry and then back in, and we're led by what's happening in our lives. It just makes for interesting stories. And yeah, for young people or career changers out there that are considering the industry, it's just such a fun and dynamic and inspirational industry to work in. So thank you, Tabetha, for sharing your story so openly today.
Thank you for having me. It's been nice to walk through my life in the work sense.
Yeah. Have you got anything you'd like to say before we sign off today?
I would encourage anyone to pursue a career in tourism, but also make sure you keep your passions for other things too, because they will lend a hand somewhere down the track. Everything you learn in life is important, and don't underestimate or devalue any of it, even the cheese counter at Maya.
Even the cheese counter. Yeah, I would love to come for a platter at your place.
Anytime you're only up the road, I'll invite you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I want to see the full array of cheeses and charcuterie.
Okay, well, let's wait for a nice sunshiny day when we can have a
Yes.
wine and some cheese, and I won't bore you with any of my work things because you already know everything now.
No, I love it. It's not boring to me. That's why I have these conversations. I love it.
And I'm so look, I'm really good at not telling a short story. I think anyone that knows me knows that. But I haven't even touched on some of the boards that I sit on, and that's another thing I would say to people: volunteer on boards and do volunteer work. It really does pay in so many ways, and it's a great way to get experience if you don't have it. Yeah, people love to have you on board. People want to help you, so yeah, just go out and do fun stuff.
Agreed, Tabitha. All right. Well, thank you once again for being here with me today. And thank you for sharing so openly. And I'll be sure to put your LinkedIn contact information or your LinkedIn
I'll try and
profile,
put more
I should
interesting
say.
things up there.
People can reach out to you if they want to connect.
Thanks, Carmen. And thanks for this podcast. It's really important. Tourism does matter.
Oh, thanks, Tabitha. I appreciate that. All right. You enjoy your day.
Okay.
Thanks.